I was 34 years old when I found him dying in the mountains of Washington state, and for the next 40 years I would keep the most impossible secret anyone could imagine. His name was Coda. At least that's what I came to call him, and he was a Bigfoot. What he showed me about why his kind hides, about what happened to them, will change everything you think you know about these creatures. This is my story, and I'm telling it now because Coda is gone, and the world deserves to know the truth. But before I begin, if you enjoy stories that explore the unexplainable mysteries of our world, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. This helps me continue bringing these narratives to you. Now let's get to the story. September 1982. I was a wildlife biologist working for the Forestry Service in the Cascade Mountains of Washington. My name is Dr. Michael Torres, and back then I was young, ambitious, and absolutely convinced that science could explain everything in the natural world. Bigfoot? A myth, a legend created by people who couldn't identify a bear in poor lighting. I would have laughed at anyone who suggested otherwise. On September 23, 1982, I was conducting a routine survey of elk populations in a remote area about 30 kilometers from the nearest road. The terrain was rough, dense forest mixed with rocky outcrops, the kind of place where few humans ventured. I was alone, which was standard for my work. I preferred it that way. Around 3 p.m., I heard something that made me stop. It wasn't an animal sound I recognized, and I knew every species in these mountains. It was a vocalization, deep and resonant, but with a quality that seemed almost linguistic, like someone was trying to form words but couldn't quite manage it. Professional curiosity overcame caution. I followed the sound for about a kilometer until I reached a steep ravine, and that's where I saw him. He was lying at the bottom, partially hidden by fallen logs. At first, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Too large for a bear, wrong proportions for a gorilla, even if one could somehow be here. The body was massive, easily 2.4 meters tall, even lying down, covered in dark, reddish-brown fur. But it was the face that stopped my heart. Almost human. High forehead, pronounced brow ridge, broad nose, eyes that were closed in pain. His left arm was trapped under a boulder, crushed. Blood matted the fur around the injury. He had been there for hours, maybe longer, slowly dying. Every scientific instinct told me to document this, to call for help, to alert the authorities. This was the discovery of the century, proof of an unknown hominid species in North America. My career would be made. I'd be famous. But then he opened his eyes and looked directly at me. There was intelligence there, not animal awareness, but consciousness, understanding and fear, profound, desperate fear. He tried to pull away from me, but the boulder had him pinned. He made that sound again, and I realized it wasn't a call for help. It was a plea. Please don't hurt me. Please go away. Please don't tell anyone I'm here. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, frozen by indecision. Then I made a choice that would define the rest of my life. I climbed down into the ravine. Easy, I said softly. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to help. He watched me approach with those terrified, intelligent eyes. When I reached the boulder, I examined the situation. It was large, maybe 200 kilos, but positioned on an incline. If I could lever it correctly, I might be able to shift it enough to free his arm. This is going to hurt, I told him, though I had no idea if he understood. But if I don't get you out, you'll die here. I found a sturdy branch and used it as a lever. The creature, I couldn't think of him as it tensed as I worked. The boulder shifted slightly. He let out a roar of pain that echoed through the ravine. But he didn't try to attack me. He seemed to understand I was trying to help. It took 20 minutes of careful work, but finally the boulder rolled away. His arm was badly damaged, possibly fractured, definitely requiring medical attention. But I couldn't take him to a hospital. The moment I did, he'd become a specimen, captured, studied, imprisoned. He tried to stand but collapsed, too weak from blood loss and shock. He looked at me again, and I saw resignation in his eyes. He thought I was going to call someone now, thought his freedom was over. Instead, I sat down next to him. "Can you understand me?" I asked. He watched me carefully, then slowly he nodded, a clear, deliberate human nod. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "You're not just an animal. You're a person. I made a decision right there. I'm not going to tell anyone about you, I said, but you need help, medical help. Will you let me treat you? He studied me for a long moment, then nodded again. Over the next 3 hours, I did what I could with my first aid kit, cleaned the wounds, set what I thought might be a fracture, created a splint from branches in my belt. He endured it all with remarkable stoicism, making sounds of pain, but never trying to harm me. When I finished, darkness was falling. You can't stay here, I said. Other animals will smell the blood. Can you walk if I help you? He tried to stand with my support. He was incredibly heavy, probably 250 kilos, but with both of us working together, we managed. We made our way slowly up and out of the ravine. Where do you live? I asked. Where is safe for you? He pointed deeper into the mountains, toward an area I knew was particularly remote and rugged. It would take us hours to get there in his condition, maybe all night. Okay, I said. Lead the way. I'll help you get home. We traveled through the night. It was one of the most surreal experiences of my life, supporting this massive creature through the dark forest, both of us exhausted, both of us committed to reaching safety. He would stop occasionally, listening, making sure we weren't being followed. His caution spoke volumes about how he'd survived this long. Near dawn, we reached a cave system, hidden behind a waterfall. The entrance was narrow, difficult to spot unless you knew it was there. He led me inside, and I saw that this was clearly his home. There were signs of long habitation, a sleeping area made of gathered moss and leaves, tools made from stone and bone, even what looked like stored food. You've been living here alone, I said, looking around. For how long? He made a gesture I didn't understand. Then he moved to the cave wall where in the dim light I could see marks, tallies, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Years? I asked. You've been counting years? He nodded, then held up both hands, fingers spread. Closed them, opened them, closed them. He repeated this gesture multiple times, but I could tell he was getting frustrated, unable to communicate the exact number. A long time, I said. You've been alone. A long time. He made a sound that seemed like sadness. Then he gestured at himself, then swept his hand around as if indicating the world. He was alone, the only one. Or at least, the only one he'd seen in a very long time. The sun was rising. I needed to get back before people started looking for me, but I couldn't just leave him like this, injured and alone. I'll come back, I promised. Tomorrow night, I'll bring medicine, food, supplies. Will you be here? He looked at me with those intelligent eyes. Then he did something that changed everything. He placed his hand over his heart, then extended it toward me. It was clearly a gesture of trust, of gratitude. I mimicked the gesture. Friends, I said. We're friends now. Over the next weeks, I visited Coda every few days. I brought antibiotics I claimed were for treating injured wildlife, brought food, bandages, pain medication. His arm healed slowly, though I could tell it would never be quite right again. He'd have limited mobility in that hand for the rest of his life. But something more important was happening. We were learning to communicate. Coda was remarkably intelligent. Within the first month, we'd developed a system of gestures and sounds that allowed us to express increasingly complex ideas. He learned to nod for yes, shake his head for no. He pointed at objects and I'd tell him the English word, which he'd try to repeat, though his vocal anatomy couldn't quite form human speech. It came out distorted, but the effort was there. I brought him paper and pencils, wondering if he could learn to draw. The first time I showed him how to make marks on paper, his eyes widened with wonder. Within days, he was creating simple pictures. Within weeks, his drawings were sophisticated enough to tell stories, and the stories he told me broke my heart. In October 1982, about a month after I'd found him, Coda drew me a picture that I'll never forget. It showed multiple figures like himself, a group, a family. Then he drew humans with guns. He drew his people falling. He drew cages. He drew buildings that looked like laboratories. He pointed at the picture, then at himself, then made a gesture of running. He was the only one who escaped. When did this happen? I asked. He drew the sun rising and setting over and over, so many times I lost count. Then he held up his hands in that gesture I now understood meant many, too many to count precisely. Years ago, I said. Many years ago. You've been running ever since, he nodded. Then he drew something else. More figures like himself, scattered across a rough map. Small groups. individuals, very few. He was showing me that his species was nearly extinct, hunted, captured, hiding in the most remote places they could find. Who did this, I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Who captured your people? He pointed at the buildings in his drawing, official-looking structures. Then he drew a symbol I recognized, an eagle, the U.S. government's seal. Oh God, I whispered. The government knows. They've known all along. Coda made a sound of confirmation. Then he drew more. Fences, guards, creatures in cages being studied. His people treated like animals, like property. That's why you hide, I said. Not because you're dangerous, because you're afraid of us. He nodded emphatically. Then he drew one more picture. A creature like himself, standing alone in a forest, looking at stars. Free but lonely. Safe but isolated. It was his life, survival traded for absolutely everything else. I promise you, I said, my voice shaking with anger and sadness, I will never tell anyone where you are. You're safe with me. For as long as I live, you're safe. Coda placed his hand over his heart, then touched mine. Trust. Friendship, a bond that would last 4 decades. Keeping Coda's secret meant fundamentally changing my life. I couldn't pursue the career I'd planned, couldn't take promotions that would move me away from the area, couldn't get too close to anyone who might follow me, discover where I went on my frequent solo hikes. But I did it gladly, because Coda needed me, and I'd made a promise. In 1985, I taught Coda to read. Started with simple picture books I claimed were for a niece. Within 6 months, he was reading at a basic level. Within a year, he was reading novels. I'd bring him books, and he'd devour them, hungry for knowledge about the world he could never be part of. His favorite was The Old Man and the Sea. He read it dozens of times. I think he related to the solitude, the struggle, the dignity and suffering. In 1987, Coda showed me something that proved his people had a complex culture. Deep in the cave system, in a chamber I'd never seen before, there were paintings, ancient paintings created with natural pigments, showing groups of his kind living together, hunting, gathering, celebrating what looked like ceremonies. There were symbols that might have been a form of writing. This is your history, I said, awed. Your people's history. Coda touched the paintings gently, reverently. Then he made a gesture of sadness. This was all that remained, just memories on stone. How many are left? I asked. How many of your kind still survive? He held up one hand, fingers spread. 5? Then he made a gesture of uncertainty. Maybe more. Maybe fewer. He didn't know. He hadn't seen another of his kind in over 20 years. We'll protect your history, I promised. Even if no one else ever sees it, I'll make sure it's documented. I'll make sure your people are remembered. The 1990s brought new threats. Technology was advancing rapidly. Satellite imagery meant fewer places were truly hidden. The internet allowed cryptozoology enthusiasts to coordinate searches in ways they never could before. I had to become more than just Coda's friend. I became his guardian, his protector, against a world that was getting smaller and more intrusive every year. In 1994, a major expedition was announced. A well-funded team planned to search the Cascades specifically for Bigfoot evidence. They had thermal imaging, advanced audio equipment, dozens of trail cameras, and their search area included the mountains where Coda lived. I panicked. For the first time since rescuing him, I genuinely feared he would be discovered. You need to hide, I told Coda. Stay in the deep caves. Don't go outside at all. Don't make any sounds. For at least 2 months, you need to be completely invisible. Coda understood the danger. He showed me his emergency plans, deeper caves he could retreat to, places where he could survive for months if necessary with stored food and underground water sources. He'd been preparing for this his entire life, but then he did something unexpected. He drew a picture showing himself far away in different mountains, then drew me, alone, without him. He was offering to leave permanently, to remove the risk to me entirely. No, I said firmly. This is your home. You've been here for decades. You're not leaving because of some temporary threat. We'll get through this together. The expedition came. I monitored them closely, using my position with the Forestry Service to track their movements. When they got too close to Coda's area, I'd create diversions, report sightings in other locations, leave false evidence that would draw them away. I became very good at misdirection. After 3 months, they left empty-handed. Their expedition was deemed a failure. Coda was safe, but the stress aged both of us. I realized this wouldn't be the last time. The threats would keep coming. In 1998, I made a difficult decision. I started documenting everything about Coda, his language, his behaviors, his intelligence, his history, not to publish while he lived, but to preserve the truth for after we were both gone. Someone needed to know that his people had existed, that they'd been intelligent, peaceful, and driven to near extinction by human fear and cruelty. Coda helped with the documentation. He drew more pictures, showed me everything he could remember about his people's culture. We created a comprehensive record, hidden in safety deposit boxes in 3 different cities. If something happened to either of us, the truth would eventually come out. The year 2000 was significant for another reason. Coda was aging noticeably. His fur was graying, his movements slower. I estimated he was in his 60s now, old for his species. I was 52, feeling my own age after years of difficult hikes and constant vigilance. "We're getting old, buddy," I told him one evening. Both of us. Coda made a sound of agreement. Then he drew a picture. 2 figures, one human, one like himself, sitting side by side watching a sunset. Contentment, peace, friendship that had endured decades. "No regrets?" I asked. He pointed at me, at himself, then made the heart gesture we'd established. No regrets. This was enough, but I had regrets. I regretted that Coda had spent most of his life alone, that he'd never had a family of his own. That fear had stolen so much from him, that I couldn't give him freedom, only safety. "You deserve better than this," I told him. "You deserved a full life, not just survival." Coda shook his head. He pointed at the books I'd brought him over the years. Hundreds of them now, at the drawings he'd created, at the cave that had become more than just a hiding place, but a home filled with the artifacts of our friendship. Then he pointed at me and made a gesture I'd learned meant gratitude so deep it couldn't be expressed in simple terms. "You gave me more than survival," his gestures said. "You gave me connection, knowledge, dignity, someone who saw me as a person. That's everything." The 2000s brought more challenges, but we faced them together. Drones became common, so I taught Coda to recognize their sounds and stay hidden when they approached. Trail cameras proliferated, so I learned where they were placed and made sure Coda's routes avoided them. The world kept shrinking, and we kept adapting. In 2007, I turned 59 and took early retirement, officially for health reasons, but really because I wanted to spend more time with Coda while we both still could. My colleagues thought I was becoming a reclusive eccentric. They weren't entirely wrong. I brought Coda a gift for what I estimated was his 70th birthday, a small portable DVD player with a solar charger and a collection of nature documentaries. His face, when he saw moving images for the first time, was pure wonder. He watched those documentaries hundreds of times, seeing the wild world he'd been exiled from, the animals he would have known if he'd been free. In 2012, I had a minor stroke. Nothing major, but it was a warning. My time was limited, and so was my ability to make the difficult journey to Coda's cave. "What happens to you when I'm gone?" I asked him. "Who will protect you? Who will bring you supplies?" Coda had clearly been thinking about this too. He drew a picture of himself, very old, lying peacefully in the cave, then drew the cave entrance becoming hidden by rockfall, a self-imposed tomb. He planned to seal himself in when the end came, ensuring his body would never be found. "No," I said, "that's not how this ends. You deserve better." But what better ending was there? He couldn't reveal himself. Even after death, his body would become a specimen, studied and displayed. His dignity would be stolen even in death, unless I told the story first, unless I controlled the narrative. "I'm going to write it all down," I told Coda. "Everything. Your story, your people's history, what happened to them. When we're both gone, the world will know the truth. They'll know your people weren't monsters. They were victims. Coda thought about this for a long time, then nodded. He drew one more picture. Figures like himself, faded and ghostly, but with words beneath them. He wanted his people remembered, wanted their extinction acknowledged, wanted humanity to know what we'd done. In 2015, Coda became seriously ill, some kind of respiratory infection that my antibiotics couldn't fully treat. For 3 weeks, I thought I would lose him. I stayed in the cave with him, barely leaving his side. At 67, I wasn't sure I could make the journey back and forth anymore anyway. He recovered, but we both knew it was temporary. The end was coming for both of us. The next years were gentler. Coda's health stabilized, though he was clearly in the final stage of life. He slept more, ate less, moved slowly and carefully, but his mind remained sharp. We'd spent so many years together that we could communicate complex ideas with just a glance or a gesture. In the summer of 2020, while the world panicked about COVID, Coda and I were more isolated than ever, which suited us fine. The pandemic meant fewer hikers, fewer drones, fewer threats. It was almost like the old days. One evening in August 2020, Coda drew his final picture. It showed our first meeting, him trapped under the boulder, me climbing down to help. Then it showed us side by side through the seasons, year after year. Then it showed me, old and alone, holding a book. The story. Our story. Time to tell it? I asked. He nodded. He was giving me permission. Release it when we're gone. Tell the truth. I promise, I said. The world will know. They'll know about you, about your people, about what they lost when they chose fear over understanding. Coda placed his hand over his heart, then over mine. One last time. In March 2022, during one of my visits, I found Coda in distress. He was struggling to breathe. His color was wrong. I knew what was happening. His heart was failing. I'm here, buddy, I said, sitting beside him. I'm right here. Coda looked at me with those eyes that had seen so much, survived so much, endured so much. He reached out and took my hand, his grip weak but deliberate. Then he did something he'd never done before. He tried to speak, really speak, not gestures, not sounds, but words. His vocal anatomy made it nearly impossible, but in his final moments, he found a way. Thank you. The sounds were barely recognizable, tortured by a throat not designed for human speech, but unmistakable in meaning. Thank you, friend. You're welcome, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for 40 years of friendship. Thank you for showing me that this world is bigger and more mysterious than I ever imagined. I love you, Coda. He squeezed my hand one final time, made a soft sound that might have been contentment, and then his breathing stopped. I sat with him for hours in that cave, holding the hand of the last Bigfoot I'd ever known, crying for a person the world never acknowledged existed, crying for an extinct species, crying for 40 years of friendship that had to be kept secret. Finally, as dawn broke, I did what Coda had wanted. I triggered a rockfall I'd been preparing for years, sealing the deep chamber where his body lay, creating the tomb he'd requested, ensuring he'd never become a specimen, never be dissected and displayed. He would rest there forever, hidden and dignified, in the cave that had been his sanctuary for decades. I hiked out of those mountains for the last time in March 2022. I was 74 years old, exhausted, grief-stricken, and carrying the weight of a secret I'd soon be releasing. Over the next months, I compiled everything. 40 years of documentation, thousands of drawings Coda had created, photographs of the ancient paintings in his cave, though I'd never revealed the location, video recordings I'd made of him communicating, moving, showing his intelligence. Most importantly, I wrote his story, our story, the truth about why Bigfoot hides. In November 2022, I began releasing the information. Not to the government, they'd already known and done nothing. Not to scientists who would want to find more to study, but directly to the public through multiple channels simultaneously, making it impossible to suppress. I released Coda's drawings showing the captures, the laboratories, the hunting of his people. I released documents showing that the government had known about Bigfoot since at least the 1950s, that they'd captured specimens, that they'd classified the species as a security concern and actively suppressed public knowledge. I released evidence that there had been perhaps 200 to 300 individuals in the 1950s. By the 1980s, maybe 30. Today, I honestly don't know if there are any left besides Coda, and now he's gone too. The response was exactly what I expected. Immediate and chaotic. Half the world called it an elaborate hoax. The other half demanded answers. The government initially denied everything, then slowly admitted to historical research programs, into alleged cryptid sightings. They never used the word capture. They never acknowledged the truth. But I had Coda's drawings. I had his story. And more importantly, I had the answer to the question everyone always asked. Why do they hide? They hide because we hunted them, because we captured them, because we treated them like animals instead of the intelligent, emotional, cultural beings they were. They hide because they learned that humans are the most dangerous predators on Earth. They hide because we gave them no choice. In the year since releasing Coda's story, I've been called everything from a fraud to a hero. Scientists have analyzed the evidence I released. Some support its authenticity, others remain skeptical. The government continues to neither confirm nor deny. I don't care. I kept my promise to Coda. His story is out there. His people are remembered, and maybe, just maybe, if there are any others still surviving in the deepest wilderness, humanity will choose protection over exploitation this time. I'm 76 years old now. My health is failing. Soon I'll join Coda, wherever friends go when this life ends. But I'll go knowing I did right by him, that I kept his secret when he needed it kept, that I told his truth when it needed to be told. People ask me, was it worth it? 40 years of secrecy, of isolation, of giving up a normal life. And I tell them what Coda showed me in that final picture. Two figures, side by side through the decades, different species, different worlds, but connected by something deeper than biology, connected by respect, trust, and love. That was worth everything. The truth about why Bigfoot hides isn't a mystery. It's a tragedy. They hide because we failed them, because we chose fear over understanding, exploitation over coexistence. Coda spent his entire life hiding, alone, afraid, surviving, but not truly living. And he was one of the lucky ones. He at least had a friend. He at least had someone who saw him as a person. How many others died alone in the wilderness, hunted and afraid? How many were captured and spent their lives in laboratories? How many young ones grew up never knowing their own kind, never experiencing the culture and community their species once had? We did that. Humanity did that. And we did it not out of necessity, but out of fear and curiosity and the belief that anything unknown must be either destroyed or controlled. That's the truth that should shock you. Not that Bigfoot exists or existed, but what we did when we found them. I hope Coda forgave us. Forgave me for being part of the species that destroyed his. I think he did. That's what those 40 years meant. Forgiveness. Understanding, hope that maybe we could be better. I'm sharing this story not as proof, though I've provided what evidence I can. I'm sharing it as a warning, as a reminder that intelligence and emotion and culture aren't exclusive to humans, that we share this world with beings we don't understand. And our first instinct shouldn't be to hunt, capture, or exploit. It should be to protect, to respect, to leave some mysteries mysterious. Coda is gone now. Maybe his entire species is gone. But his memory lives on in these words, in his drawings, in the story of an impossible friendship that lasted 40 years. That's his legacy, not as a specimen or a discovery, but as a person who deserved better than what the world gave him, but who found friendship anyway. Thank you for listening. Thank you for considering the possibility that we're not alone, and that the others who share our world deserve dignity, not dissection. And if you're out there, in some deep wilderness, hiding because you learned humans can't be trusted, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what we did, what we took from you. You deserved better. You all deserved so much better. Rest in peace, Coda, my friend, my brother across species, the last Bigfoot I'll ever know. Your story is told, your people are remembered, and maybe, somehow, that's enough.